The water level in Lake Mead is down, and without action, the entire valley could someday face some serious shortages.
And that's what triggered the construction of a new pipe in 2005 to help reach our shrinking Colorado River water supply.
Las Vegas is slowly running out of water, and what the city did next feels almost hard to believe. Under the dropping surface of Lake Mead, engineers made a bold and urgent move, drilling deep below the lake to reach the little water that is still left.
This is where the tunnel boring machine started. It's a 3-mile drive out underneath Lake Mead. This intake is going to help ensure that we can continue to access our community's water supply, even if lake levels continue to decline because of the drought.
This was not just a normal project. It became a race against time as the water kept falling to risky levels. But even with this big effort, new questions are starting to come up. How long can this fix really last? And what will happen if the lake keeps going down even more? Join us in this video as we discuss the details. Las Vegas drills under Lake Mead to survive. Las Vegas is a city that, in many ways, was never supposed to exist. It sits deep inside the Mojave Desert, a place known for its dry air, its extreme heat, and its very limited natural water. The land is harsh, and the conditions are not friendly to large human settlements. There are no strong rivers flowing through the city, no natural lakes nearby that can support millions of people, and no hidden underground water sources large enough to sustain long-term growth. And yet, despite all of this, the city grew, slowly at first, and then very fast. Back in the early days, Las Vegas was small and quiet. It was just a simple railroad town with a small number of people trying to get by. But then, things began to change. Casinos started to appear. Roads improved. Air conditioning made life in the desert more bearable. And before long, more and more people started to arrive. Over time, the population grew into the millions. Today, more than 2 million people live in the Las Vegas area, and millions more visit every single year. But all of these people need one very important thing to survive, and that is water. And almost all of that water comes from just one place, Lake Mead. This lake is not just important. It is everything. It supplies nearly all the water that the city uses every day, from drinking and cooking to cleaning and bathing. Without it, the city would struggle to survive, even for a short period of time. The problem, however, is that Lake Mead has been shrinking. And it has been shrinking for a long time. For more than 20 years, the water level has been going down little by little, year after year. At first, the changes were slow and not easy to notice, but over time, they became harder to ignore. The shoreline began to move. The water pulled back, and what was once a full and wide lake started to look smaller and weaker. By the year 2022, the situation had become very serious. The water level dropped so low that it was getting dangerously close to the point where the city could no longer draw water from it. This was not just about having less water. It was about the real possibility of having no access at all. The pipes that carried water to the city were at risk of no longer reaching the lake. And if that happened, the supply would not just be reduced, it would be gone. This growing danger forced officials to take action. They knew they could not just sit and wait. They had to find a way to reach deeper into the lake, to access water that would still be there even if the surface levels continued to fall. So they came up with a bold and risky plan. They would build a new system, one that would go deeper than anything they had ever built before. This project became known as the third straw. It was not a simple fix. It was a massive and complicated effort that required years of planning, hard work, and careful execution. Workers had to drill a long tunnel through solid rock, far below the surface of the lake. The goal was to reach water at a much lower level, a level that would remain available even during extreme drought. The work was not easy. The rock was tough and difficult to cut through. The heat underground made conditions uncomfortable and dangerous. Water could leak into the tunnel at any moment, creating the risk of flooding. And every step had to be done with great care, because even a small mistake could cause serious problems. Still, the project moved forward. It took 7 long years to complete, and in the end, the tunnel was finished. It reached deep below the lake, giving the city a new way to access water. But this success came at a very high cost. The total price of the project reached about $1.4 billion. This was a huge amount of money, and it did not come from nowhere. It came from the people. Residents and businesses had to pay more for water over time, helping to cover the cost of the project. Even though the third straw was completed and started working, it did not solve everything. The lake was still shrinking. The deeper intake made it possible to reach water at lower levels, but it did not create new water. It did not refill the lake. It simply allowed the city to keep taking what was left. At the same time, the problem was not limited to Las Vegas alone. The water that fills Lake Mead comes from the Colorado River, and this river is shared by many places. About 40 million people depend on it across several states. This means that the demand for water is very high, and everyone is drawing from the same source. The situation becomes even more complicated when looking at history. A long time ago, in 1922, an agreement known as the Colorado River Compact divided the river's water among different states. But the problem is that the agreement was based on incorrect assumptions. It assumed that the river would always have more water than it actually does. As a result, more water was promised than the river can truly provide. This mistake has had long-lasting effects. For many years, the system has been under pressure. More water is being used than is being replaced, and this has slowly pushed the region closer to a crisis. Las Vegas is now living with the results of that decision, trying to manage a future that was built on a flawed understanding of the past. So, after drilling deeper for water, is that enough to save Las Vegas? Or does the real answer lie in using less? Let's find out. Buying time in an uncertain future. After completing the third straw, Las Vegas did not stop there. City leaders and water managers understood that simply reaching deeper water would not be enough. The real issue was not just access. It was used. If people continued to use water at the same rate, then even the deepest tunnel would eventually become useless. So the city began to focus on using less water, and doing so in a very serious and determined way. Over time, these efforts began to show results. Since the early 2000s, the city has managed to reduce how much water each person uses by more than 40%. This is a very large reduction, especially when considering that the population has continued to grow during the same period. In simple terms, more people are living in the city, but the total water use has not increased in the same way. This shows that conservation efforts have been effective. One of the most important steps taken was improving water recycling. Inside homes and buildings, water that is used for things like showers, sinks, and toilets is collected, cleaned, and treated. After treatment, it is sent back into Lake Mead. This allows the same water to be used again. In fact, almost all indoor water, about 99%, is recycled in this way. This system helps stretch the available supply and makes better use of every drop. Outdoor water use, however, has been a bigger challenge. In a hot desert environment, water used outside often does not return to the system. It evaporates into the air or is absorbed into the ground. This means it cannot be reused. To deal with this, the city made a strong decision. It began removing decorative grass, especially in areas where it served no real purpose. Lawns that existed only for appearance were taken out and replaced with more water-efficient landscaping. This change has saved a huge amount of water. Billions of gallons are no longer wasted each year on grass that does not provide real value. It was not an easy decision, and not everyone was happy about it, but it was necessary. At the same time, there have been discussions about limiting how much water households can use. The idea is simple. If water is limited, then usage must also be limited. Some people have resisted this idea as it affects personal habits and daily life. But the reality is hard to ignore. When a resource is running out, it cannot be used without limits forever. Even with all of these efforts, the situation remains uncertain. Nature still plays a major role, and it cannot be controlled. There was a moment of hope when heavy snowfall in the mountains brought more water into the system. The lake level rose, and things looked a little better for a short time. But experts quickly warned that this was only temporary. One good year cannot erase many years of drought. Looking ahead, the future appears challenging. Climate patterns are changing. Temperatures are rising. Rainfall is becoming less predictable. All of these factors make it harder for the lake to recover and stay full. Scientists have also found evidence that very long droughts have happened in the past, lasting for decades. This raises concerns that such conditions could happen again. There is also another issue that is not always visible. As water levels go up and down, the lake bed is disturbed. This can release harmful materials that have been trapped in the ground for many years. These materials can mix with the water, affecting its quality. So even if water is available, it may not always be clean or safe without proper treatment. The third straw was designed to help during difficult times. It gives the city a way to reach water that would otherwise be out of reach. But it has its limits. If the water level drops too far, even this system will not be enough. At a certain point, there simply will not be any water left to take. In the end, Las Vegas has done many things right. It has built advanced systems. It has reduced water use. It has planned ahead in ways that many other cities have not. But the challenge it faces is larger than any single solution. It is a problem that involves nature, history, population growth, and climate change all at once. The city is not out of danger. It has gained time, and that time is valuable. But time alone is not a permanent solution. What happens next will depend on many factors, some of which are beyond human control. And so the question remains open, quiet, but very serious. Could Las Vegas's deep tunnel and water-saving measures hold against the desert? Or will engineering limits and unforeseen challenges push the city to the edge? Let's delve deeper. The third straw, engineering survival in the desert. The construction of the third water intake system, often called the third straw, was an extraordinary engineering project. It was not a simple job. Engineers had to drill a tunnel that stretched 3 miles under Lake Mead. The tunnel went through very hard volcanic rock, which made the drilling process slow, difficult, and dangerous. The rock itself is tough and unforgiving. Every foot drilled required careful work and constant monitoring. The equipment used in the tunnel often broke down because the pressure and conditions underground were stronger than expected. In addition, water seeped through cracks in the rock. These leaks could have flooded sections of the tunnel if they were not handled immediately. Workers faced intense heat in the underground tunnel, and the spaces were tight and uncomfortable. Despite these hardships, the team had to be extremely precise. Any small mistake in the angle of the tunnel could have caused them to miss the intake point entirely. Missing it would have meant starting over, which was impossible. Even with these challenges, the tunnel was completed successfully. It is now the deepest municipal water intake ever built in the United States, reaching water that no drought could touch. Many critics argued that $1.4 billion was far too much to spend on drilling a tunnel when other options might have been better. Some experts said the money could have been used for water recycling programs, desalination plants, or stricter water usage limits. Environmental groups also said the project could encourage more growth in Las Vegas. People might think the city can keep expanding because engineers will always find a way to get more water. Officials responded by saying the project was not meant to encourage growth. It was meant to make sure the city could survive in the worst conditions. They said the desert does not allow for optimism. Water managers plan for the worst. And in this case, the worst was happening. This problem was not only about Las Vegas. The Colorado River supplies water to about 40 million people in 7 states. That is a very large number of people depending on the same river. There is a lot of competition for this water, especially as demand keeps growing while supply becomes less certain. This shared dependence has forced states to negotiate and cooperate to avoid conflict over water use. The problem goes back almost 100 years. In 1922, the Colorado River Compact was signed. This agreement divided the river's water among several states. However, the measurements used to divide the water were taken during an unusually wet period. Because of this, the agreement gave out more water than the river could actually provide most years. Over decades, this caused a growing gap between the water available and the water that people were using. The problem slowly built up and is one of the main reasons shortages are now so severe. There have been small periods of relief. One example is the winter of 2022 to 2023, when heavy snowfall in the Rocky Mountains added more water to the river system. This increased the water level in Lake Mead and gave a short-term improvement. However, experts warned that this kind of recovery is temporary and fragile. It depends on weather that cannot be counted on. The long-term trend of declining water levels continues because of ongoing drought and higher temperatures. Climate change adds another serious challenge. Scientists predict that the region will become hotter and drier. Droughts are likely to last longer and become more severe. This makes it even harder to rely on a single source like Lake Mead. Research into the area's climate history shows that mega-droughts lasting decades have happened before. The recent 20-year dry period may not have been unusual, but instead a warning of what can happen in the future. Finally, water quality is also a concern. As Lake Mead's levels go up and down, sediments from the lake bed are stirred up. These sediments contain heavy metals and other pollutants from past industrial and mining activity. When they mix with the water, it may not be safe to drink without additional treatment. This shows that drilling a tunnel to reach water is not the same as having clean, safe water. In conclusion, the third straw was an extraordinary achievement. It allowed access to water that would otherwise have been unreachable. However, it did not fix the overall problem of too many people relying on too little water. Short-term gains have been made, but the long-term risk remains high. How did Lake Mead drop this low in the first place? And what is really driving this growing water crisis? Keep watching for more. Lake Mead and the water crisis in Las Vegas. Right now, in the American Southwest, there is a city called Las Vegas, which depends almost entirely on water from a single reservoir. That reservoir is called Lake Mead, the largest man-made lake in the United States. For decades, people have known that this lake is shrinking, but what has happened recently is alarming. The water level in Lake Mead has continued to drop, and the situation is serious enough that emergency measures have become necessary. Las Vegas now uses a tunnel under the bottom of Lake Mead to pull water for the city. That tunnel, called Intake Number 3, or the third straw, was built to be an emergency backup. Today, it is no longer just a backup. It has become the main source of water for the city. The numbers make this very clear. On March 1st, 2026, Lake Mead's water level was at 1,666 feet above sea level. By March 21st, 2026, just 20 days later, the water had dropped to 1,664 feet. That is a loss of almost 2 feet in less than a month. Normally, at this time of year, snow melting in the Rocky Mountains helps refill the lake. But this year, even the snow is not enough. The lake is now at 34% of its full capacity. To put this into perspective, Lake Mead can hold 26 million acre-feet of water when it is full. Right now, it has only about 8.75 million acre-feet. The forecast is not promising. According to the Bureau of Reclamation, the water level could reach 1,032 feet by November 2027. That would break the previous record low of 1,040 feet set in 2022 by 8 feet. These numbers are worse than forecasts just a few months ago. For example, the January 2026 forecast was about 4 feet higher than the new March forecast. This means the situation is getting worse month by month. Scientists and water managers have been warning for years that the worst-case scenario could become the most likely scenario. And it seems that warning is now coming true. Part of the reason for the rapid drop in water is the reduced inflow from Lake Powell, the reservoir that feeds Lake Mead. This year, inflow is projected at 5 million acre-feet, which is only 52% of the 30-year average. During the critical spring months, from April to July, when snow from the Rockies should melt and refill the system, the inflow is expected to be just 2.44 million acre-feet, or 38% of normal. This is a major shortfall. Lake Mead does not just provide water for Las Vegas. It also supplies water to 40 million people across 7 U.S. states and northern Mexico. That includes both cities and farmland. Las Vegas has taken action to protect its water supply. The Southern Nevada Water Authority built the third straw, a 3-mile tunnel that reaches under the lake bed to an underwater intake pipe. The tunnel was constructed between 2008 and 2015 at a cost of about $817 million. A second part, the low lake level pumping station, came online in 2020 and began full operations in 2022. That station cost $522 million. Together, these two projects cost about $1.5 billion. They allow Las Vegas to access water even when Lake Mead drops below the level needed for Hoover Dam to operate normally. The city has also made huge efforts to reduce water use. Since 2002, per-person water use has fallen by 55%, even as the population grew by more than 800,000 people. Indoor water use, including showers, toilets, and hotel operations, is largely recycled. Nearly all water used indoors is treated and returned to Lake Mead through the Las Vegas Wash, meaning the water does not leave the system. Nevada now recycles 85% of its wastewater, the highest rate of any state in the Colorado River Basin. Despite these efforts, the water level continues to fall. The problem is not just local water use. It is a long-term shift in the water cycle of the Southwest. The region is experiencing what scientists call a mega-drought, a long-term dry period that has lasted over 25 years. Tree ring studies show that this is the driest 22-year stretch in at least 1,200 years. Climate change caused by human activity is responsible for roughly 42% of this drought's strength. Without human-driven warming, the drought would likely have ended around 2005. The Colorado River itself tells the story in simple numbers. Its flows have dropped by about 20% since 2000, with the current average flow at 12.2 million acre-feet per year. Yet, legal agreements and treaties promise 16.5 million acre-feet per year. That means the river has been over-allocated by about 4.3 million acre-feet every year for decades. With Lake Mead still falling, what does this mean for power at Hoover Dam? Keep watching for more details. Falling water levels and the growing power crisis. While the falling water levels at Lake Mead are already creating serious concerns for water supply, there is another problem slowly building at the same time. And that problem has to do with electricity. Sitting just downstream of Lake Mead is the well-known Hoover Dam, a massive structure that does not only hold back water, but also produces power for millions of people. As the water level continues to drop, the ability of this dam to produce electricity is being affected in ways that are becoming harder to ignore. To begin with, Hoover Dam was designed to work best when Lake Mead is full or close to full. It has 17 turbines in total, and when everything is running at full capacity, it can produce up to 2,080 megawatts of electricity. However, the reality today looks very different. With the lake now sitting at around 1,664 feet, the dam is no longer able to operate at that full level. Instead, it is currently producing about 1,300 megawatts, which means there has already been a 37% drop in power output. This drop in power is not just a small technical issue. It has real effects that people can feel. Back in the year 2000, Hoover Dam was producing close to 4 billion kilowatt-hours of electricity each year. Now, that number has fallen to about 2 billion kilowatt-hours. That is a 50% reduction, and it shows just how much the situation has changed over time. Less electricity means that the people and communities who depend on this power must start looking for other, often more expensive, sources of energy. The problem becomes even more serious when looking at how the turbines themselves are designed. Out of the 17 turbines, 12 are original units that were built many decades ago, between the 30s and 40s. These older turbines were built to work best when water levels are much higher, usually between 1,100 and 1,200 feet. As the water level drops closer to 1,035 feet, these turbines begin to face a dangerous condition known as cavitation. Cavitation happens when water pressure becomes too low, causing tiny bubbles to form and then collapse with force. These bubbles may sound small and harmless, but over time, they can cause serious damage to the turbine blades. If this continues, the turbines may have to be shut down completely to prevent further damage. If those 12 older turbines are forced to shut down, only 5 newer turbines, known as wide head turbines, would remain in operation. These are designed to handle lower water levels, but even they have limits. Together, they can only produce about 382 megawatts of electricity. When compared to the original full capacity of 2,080 megawatts, this would represent an 82% drop in power production. Experts have warned that this situation may not be far away. Federal forecasts suggest that water levels could fall low enough to force turbine shutdowns by around mid-2027. With turbine risks becoming more serious as water levels fall, the next question is, how will these power cuts affect millions of people and the regions that depend on Hoover Dam? Let's take a closer look. Widespread impact, rising costs, and uncertain future. If that happens, the impact would spread across several states. The electricity generated by Hoover Dam is shared among different regions. California receives about 56%, Nevada gets around 23.4%, and Arizona receives about 19%. Within California, Major users include the Metropolitan Water District and the city of Los Angeles. These areas depend on this power not just for homes, but also for moving water across long distances. Smaller communities are even more vulnerable. For example, rural areas like Lincoln County Power District rely on Hoover Dam for about 70% of their electricity. These areas cover large distances and serve thousands of people. There are also tribal communities, such as those served by the Navajo Tribal Utility Authority, that depend on this power source. When the supply drops, these communities must turn to other options, such as natural gas power, which often costs more. This means higher electricity bills for people who may already be struggling. In response to these risks, the government has started to take some steps. In February 2026, Congress passed the Help Hoover Dam Act, which provides $50 million for repairs and upgrades. This funding is meant to help rebuild turbines and improve systems so the dam can continue operating safely. However, the full cost of replacing the older turbines and upgrading the system over time is estimated to be much higher, reaching around $156 million for turbine work and about $200 million for broader improvements. At the same time, there is also growing pressure on leaders to solve the larger problem of how water from the Colorado River is shared. The current agreements that control water use are set to expire at the end of 2026, and a new deal must be reached by October 1, 2026. However, the states involved have struggled to agree. Some states want to protect their current water share, while others are pushing for major cuts. This disagreement adds another layer of uncertainty. Even as engineers work to keep the dam running and protect its turbines, the bigger question of how to manage less water remains unanswered. The system is being pushed from both sides by nature and by human decisions. In the end, the situation at Hoover Dam shows that the problem is not only about water. It is also about energy, cost, and the ability of systems built long ago to handle a very different future. In the end, the situation at Lake Mead and Hoover Dam shows a slow but serious crisis that is still unfolding. Water levels keep dropping, and this affects not just water supply, but also power, cost, and daily life for millions of people. Even with strong efforts to save water and improve systems, the gap between supply and demand remains wide. Nature is changing, and the old systems are struggling to keep up. What happens next will depend on both human decisions and the environment. The big question now is whether these challenges can be managed in time, or if deeper problems still lie ahead. What do you think about the third straw of Lake Mead? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for watching as we explored the growing crisis at Lake Mead. If these insights into water, power, and survival in the desert kept you thinking, don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video on your screen to go even further into more unfolding stories. See you there.